A new report says that the Israeli military views the casualty data put out by the Gaza Health Ministry as reliable. The United States is considering leaving Syria, and we have our first announcement coming tomorrow from the International Court of Justice related to the allegations brought forward by South Africa that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza. So let's get into it. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, since October 7th, 25,700 Palestinians have so far been killed, along with 63,740 wounded. That is the Gaza Health Ministry published here through Al Jazeera. And according to a new report in Mekomet, the Israeli Defense Forces view those numbers as reliable. So Mekomet is a Hebrew publication, so all of this is coming through translation, so bear with me there, and I'm probably mispronouncing that name at baseline. But they say, Israeli intelligence secretly surveilled officials in Gaza's health ministry to check if their data on the number of civilians killed in Gaza is, quote, reliable. The army found the numbers are reliable and now regularly uses them internally in intelligence briefings. According to two sources, Israeli intelligence has no good independent measure of the total number of civilians the army killed in Gaza, making the health ministry's data their main source of information. One reason for this is that the officers conducted hundreds of AI-directed strikes against suspected low-level Hamas operatives, usually by destroying entire homes and killing entire families. They say there was often no battle damage assessment for these strikes, meaning that there was no check on who and how many civilians may have been killed. And then wrapping up here, quoting an official in the IDF that remains anonymous, he says, quote, "That's why I trust the health ministry in Gaza more than the IDF for these statistics. The army just doesn't have the information," end quote. Shouldn't be a big shock. I understand how this is probably going to come across, but if you look at any publication citing casualty data inside of Gaza for the Palestinian people, it always starts with the health ministry. That's the only organization in Gaza that is tracking and compiling that data. So whether you see it in the United Nations reports, in Al Jazeera, like the one I published here, or any other publication, when you look down in the notes in the fine print, it is all coming back to the Gaza Ministry of Health. That's the only organization you can start with for this data. So it's not crazy at all that Israel is also using the Gaza Health Ministry for their data points. Of course, the big piece here is that the IDF, far from an official recognition that those statistics are accurate, it sounds like unofficially, at least according to this report, Israel views those as accurate enough to put those forward in their ongoing briefings. Then turning to operations on the ground, Israel says that they continued their offensive in the Khan Yunis area. It's the southern portion of the Gaza Strip, where they say they deepened their operational control of a previous Hamas stronghold. They talked about a special operation carried out by snipers that I thought was interesting. They said this took place over the course of a couple hours, where they were tricking Hamas operatives to pop out of tunnels in Khan Yunis. Like, they identified the tunnel, set up a sniper position nearby, and when the Hamas militants exited the tunnel to reposition equipment or attack Israeli forces, there were snipers waiting nearby to eliminate. And they said they killed several Hamas militants using this technique. They also say, Israel says that they raided a command center belonging to the head of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad's intelligence unit, as well as a Hamas command center in Khan Yunis, and that the troops seized weapons, military equipment, as well as maps and other valuable intelligence information. That intelligence gathering during the course of these raids is what is going to facilitate future targeting across the Gaza Strip. So as Israel moves into any one of these positions, even if it's a fighting position or a headquarters, command node, whatever it might be, the intelligence that the Israeli forces are able to gather will then go into a targeting cycle to where they can help determine what their next point will be that they'll go after. Then turning to Hamas, they claimed responsibility for 7 attacks against Israeli forces across the Gaza Strip yesterday. One of those was talking about a booby-trapped home that Hamas said they detonated with as many as 10 Israeli soldiers inside. Then turning to the West Bank, Israel says that they arrested 16 people as part of an operation to counter terrorism in and around Jenin. They say they found IED components, exchanged gunfire with a few militants, and discovered a 3D printer used to manufacture weapons, which isn't anything new. Jake Hanrahan of Popular Front talks about this quite a bit. It's something he's really delved into in the past. That's a real thing for organizations to do, to 3D print weapons that are being used on the battlefields. Haven't heard a lot about it so far in Gaza or the West Bank, but not the most shocking thing that it's coming out of there. And so far, since the beginning of the war, since October 7th, Israel says that they have arrested 2,700 people across the West Bank. 1,300 of those they say are associated with Hamas. Then there was an article yesterday in Foreign Policy suggesting that the United States might be considering leaving Syria. So they say, while no definitive decision has been made to leave, 4 sources within the Defense and State Departments said the White House is no longer invested in sustaining a mission that it perceives as unnecessary. Active internal discussions are now underway to determine how and when a withdrawal may take place. I think we should always be reevaluating the forces we have abroad, no matter what. I mean, I went on a long rant. There's about 900 troops on or about in Syria at this point. I think that's the official number. I went on a rant yesterday talking about how we are now in a war with Iran. It's a war on their terms, and I stand by that. We've got, U.S. troops in Iraq and Syria have been attacked over 130 times in the past 3 months. 83 American service members have been wounded by these Iranian-backed militias. We have to assess that with the troops on the ground and the troops in the region and understand that that threat is there and growing. Maybe the decision will be made to leave. Maybe the decision is to ramp up who we have there. Maybe it's more air defense assets. Maybe it's more partnering. Maybe it's more aircraft overhead. I don't know. But we need to continually keep this front of mind. Our troops that we have in the Middle East right now are under constant attack by Iranian-backed groups, whether it's the Islamic resistance in Iraq that is attacking our forces in Iraq and Syria, or the Houthis in Yemen getting weapons, training, and potentially targeting data from the Iranians that are launching missiles and drones at U.S. Navy ships. All of those are designed. The attacks on U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria, the attacks on U.S. Navy vessels in the Red Sea, those are designed to kill Americans. They're just not doing it, right? It's not for lack of effort. They are trying almost every day to kill Americans. So any conversation that goes into, should we be there? How should we be there? Does this make sense for the United States going forward? I think it's a conversation worth having constantly. We owe that to the troops on the ground that right now are in harm's way. Now, when it comes to Syria, the threat of Islamic State still remains. They're not gone. And that's one of the kind of stated missions of why the United States there. It's the Defeat ISIS mission that's ongoing in Iraq and Syria. The Islamic State put out just a few months ago what they called a worldwide campaign titled "Kill Them Wherever You Find Them." And part of this was believed to have been rolled up in the Islamic State attack in Iran just a couple weeks ago. In the first 10 days of January, Islamic State claimed responsibility for 100 attacks around the world, right? Kind of under the radar there. 100 attacks by the Islamic State in the first 10 days of 2024. 35 of those, 35% of the attacks were conducted in Syria. So this isn't the Islamic State of 2014 or 2015, kind of at the peak of their power, but they still exist, very much so. They have not been defeated. They're not gone. They're still carrying out attacks today, a lot of those in Syria, and they still do have decent capabilities. And right now, again, I think this is a worthwhile conversation to have if we're pursuing the right course. But the situation right now is kind of a really good setup for Islamic State. They take advantage of regional tension. They take advantage of gaps in security. And every day that the war in Gaza goes on is a recruiting pitch and a call for their followers or new recruits to carry out attacks against the United States or Israeli targets anywhere around the world. So what we're seeing every day, again, every day that Israel is in Gaza is another opportunity for Islamic State to leverage that to their advantage. So just something to keep an eye on. It's worth noting that Iranian media kind of jumped all over this. There was this one article in Foreign Policy, of course, U.S. publication, but then it was reposted and quoted across multiple Iranian outlets and kind of the front page in a lot of ways. And of course, the suggestion there is that the United States, I think I saw this I'll see if I can find it. I think it was a U.S. publication. The suggestion being that the decision right now being made or the argument about leaving Syria is due to these Iranian attacks. So of course, that's something that Iran is going to jump on and say, hey, look, we're doing it. We're getting the job done. Then turning down to the Red Sea, where the Houthis fired missiles at a U.S. container ship and said that they struck an American warship. It's kind of conflicting information on this one. So according to U.S. Central Command, the Houthis fired 3 anti-ship ballistic missiles from Yemen towards the U.S. flagged, owned, and operated container ship Maersk Detroit, which was transiting the Gulf of Aden. They say 1 missile impacted in the sea. 2 other missiles were successfully engaged and shot down by the USS Gravely. No reported injuries or damage to the ship. However, the Houthis put out their own statement. They put out a lot here that I think is worth going through. They said, and by the way, the Houthis are now starting to put out announcements in English. How about that? First time in a while. They said a clash took place today with a number of American destroyers and warships in the Gulf of Aden, while those ships were providing protection for 2 American commercial ships. The results of the engagement were as follows: a direct hit on an American warship, forcing the 2 American merchant ships to retreat and return. A number of our ballistic missiles reached their targets despite the attempt of warships to intercept them. In the clash, which lasted for more than 2 hours, the Yemeni armed forces used a number of ballistic missiles. Now, as of this recording, I haven't heard any official statements from the United States government, Department of Defense, Central Command, U.S. Fifth Fleet, anyone who would talk about this attack. They haven't mentioned this at all. So I don't know if this is the Houthis making something up, if it's yet to be reported in U.S. media, if it's the Houthis confusing this with what the U.S. is calling missiles falling into the sea around a container ship. Again, hopefully have more information on this soon. And then the leader of the Houthis yesterday put out a statement saying the only solution is to bring food and medicine to the people of Gaza and stop the crimes of genocide. The longer the aggression on the Gaza Strip continues, the more responsibility will be placed on our Islamic nation to move more and stronger. The more the Israelis and the Americans insist on continuing the crime, the more persistent and determined we must be to prevent this. So we're going to start hearing a lot. I think we've already started to get a little bit about how successful and how effective the U.S. and U.K. strikes have been against some of these Houthi targets. Keep this in mind when you're hearing that. The Houthis seem very much dug in at this point. There's not a lot of indications to suggest from the publicly available information that this is going to stop anytime soon. And we talked about it in the past. The United States is not going to be able to completely destroy all Houthi launch capabilities and all of their drones. A lot of these are mobile launchers, right? And it's only going to require, one drone, one missile every couple days to continue disruptions in the Red Sea. So the Houthis are kind of sticking to their guns right now, saying we're not stopping anytime soon. And again, the U.S. just named this operation, Poseidon's Archer. It doesn't look like the U.S., U.K., or our allies are backing down either. Then a couple days ago, the United States carried out airstrikes in Iraq targeting the group Kataib Hezbollah. They have since released a statement. So Kataib Hezbollah is a part of the Hezbollah brigades, kind of a proxy of Lebanese Hezbollah. They fall under the Islamic resistance in Iraq and are part of the overall, as they refer to themselves, axis of resistance. The United States struck some of their facilities in Iraq a couple days ago that were housing drone and missile components, as well as headquarters and logistics facilities. They put out a statement on Telegram saying, quote, the continued American intransigence in attacking the headquarters of the Popular Mobilization Forces and the security forces calls for changing the equation of deterrence by expanding the circle of resistance response from the military bases of the occupation forces to their interests in Iraq and the region. They say the Islamic resistance, the Hezbollah brigades, will remain committed to inflicting painful blows on the American occupation forces until they are driven out of the land of Iraq and the region so that its people may enjoy security and stability, in addition to supporting Gaza, which is still steadfast and fighting the tyranny of the American entity in the occupied land of Palestine. So a couple reasons I wanted to bring this up. First off, this is Kataib Hezbollah saying we're going to expand operations. So much for just attacking American bases. We're going to start hitting other American interests in the region. Got to keep an eye on that. It's not entirely clear the route that this would take. But again, we've talked about this. They're viewed as a militia, as kind of a ragtag group, but they have been funded and resourced by Iran for a long time now. And Iran has pretty open access to bring some of their more advanced military technology to these groups like Kataib Hezbollah. This is part of the Iranian strategy to build up the capabilities of these proxy forces. So I wouldn't take these threats lightly. It's not entirely clear what direction they're going to play out, but they likely do have the ability to inflict significant blows on American interests in the region. And the second part I wanted to bring up here is they say they're continuing to support Gaza, which is still steadfast in fighting the tyranny of the American entity in the occupied land of Palestine. They didn't say Israel at all. You notice that? And this is something we've talked about before here, where so many groups in the region are not looking at what's happening in Gaza and saying that's Israel. Also, the United States is supporting them. There's so many groups saying that is the United States. The bombs falling on Gaza, that is the United States. The Palestinian civilians that are killed at the hands of the United States. That is a rallying cry. That is a recruiting pitch to people all around the world to not just take action against Israel, but to take direct action against the United States. This is where it comes from. And I try to highlight it anytime I can when any of these groups just kind of completely bypass Israel and go straight to holding the United States fully responsible for everything that is happening in this war. Then turning to the International Court of Justice, who tomorrow, on Friday, is going to make their first announcement, really, as to whether or not they're going to order emergency measures against Israel after South Africa filed a case accusing Israel of genocide during their assault on Gaza. So, a couple notes, this is important, what it is and what it isn't. This is not the final determination as to whether or not Israel is committing a genocide. Before we even get to that, the International Court of Justice has to make a determination if it's plausible, at which point they will continue a years-long investigation. That determination as to whether or not this is plausible is still a couple weeks out. What this is they're looking at these emergency measures that South Africa requested when this all kicked off, likely going to be requesting that Israel put in place a ceasefire and allow more humanitarian aid to flow in. So this initial announcement coming from the International Court of Justice, you really shouldn't read too much into it one way or the other. It's, in a sense, kind of detached from the overall hearing. It sounds like, according to a couple articles having gone through here, it doesn't sound like the ICJ has really delved into that genocide question yet. That is still yet to come. But either way, it's possible that within the next 24 hours, the ICJ will request that Israel implement a ceasefire in Gaza. But that's all I got for now. Of course, if interested in this or other national security subjects, be sure to check out my Substack, which is linked in the description below. We've just started to bring some more people on board to provide some deep dives. They're kind of complementary to the topics I talk about in these videos, and all of their work is available for free. So I think it'll be pretty good value. Check that out if interested. But thanks for watching. I'll see y'all next time.